Hey friends, welcome back to Artists of the Way. I'm John, the host, and I am incredibly excited to be back at it with the podcast. I've got a really exciting lineup of guests coming up in the next month. Really excited to show you guys those, but I am a little bit behind on recording them. So we're doing another episode with just me. I'm excited about this topic. I was thinking about it, trying to figure out, do I have something to talk about? I don't want to talk about something if I don't have something to talk about. And so I was just sitting doing some work, and I had this book that I'm reading sitting on the counter next to me as I was working. And it kind of sparked this idea. Today we're going to talk about what I'm going to call grounding art. Art that's helped keep me grounded through 2024 and what that has looked like. It's kind of a nebulous concept in my head, but it's been a very chaotic year. A lot has happened. Godspell obviously has happened, which has been wonderful and amazing and such a blessing. But there were challenges with that, as there always are with shows. Things came up, things happened. So, but then just personally, one of the most challenging years I think I've faced in a long time. I was talking to my wife earlier this week, and we were like, let's rank the last 5 years by how crazy they've been. 2020 was the lowest on both of our lists, which I thought was funny. But this year was my top. There's been a lot going on. And so normally, if you know me or if we talk for any length of time about art, you're probably going to get the picture that I tend to be somebody who likes some challenge in my art. I want something meaty. I want something angsty. I talked about Logan before and Hamlet before, and I don't know. I tend to go to a piece of art where I'm like, by the end, I want to be like feeling like really wrecked or destroyed, or I want to come away like, profoundly impacted, or, that's an aspect of the world I haven't personally seen, so that was really challenging, and all these kinds of things. And then this year was just absolutely crazy. And so I started thinking about, I was trying to read some more books, actually, was kind of how this started. Because I'm trying to write this fantasy book. So in general, I'm trying to keep listening to or reading fantasy fairly regularly so that I kind of know the world a little bit, like, of fantasy, and I'm taking in the art form so I can put it out, right? Which is newer for me because I'm not very good at reading fiction. Which is weird since I love art so much, but I very much tend to be, there's something about reading that has tended, I should say, to connect with sort of the left brain analytical side of me. So usually when I'm reading a nonfiction book about theology or about art or about acting or about, somebody's life story, any number of things, but it's usually nonfiction that I can get through. But I've been making a concerted effort to get into reading fiction and to get better at that. So as I was kind of working through this, trying to figure out, okay, what's going to be my next book, one called I Cheerfully Refuse came on my radar through the Rabbit Room, and it was pitched as kind of this sort of near future post-apocalyptic sci-fi kind of thing, but it's just about a dude sailing across Lake Superior to find his wife. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting character-wise. Sounds like it's an interesting setting. Let's give it a go. It had a hook, which usually is the thing that's kind of drawn me into fiction. So I jumped in and was struck by a lot of times it really did not feel very post-apocalyptic or near future. I would just kind of forget about that aspect and just get drawn in with the characters. And then something would happen and I'd be reminded of it. And it was an interesting world. So, and like all the elements fit together well. But I kind of forgot and just started to fall in love with the prose of the book, which was not something, or it's at least rarely something that's happened to me before, where I've read a book and I've just said, man, the way this person writes and the characters that they write are really beautiful and resonating with me. So that was new. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try another one of this guy's books because I really liked it. Let's see what else he wrote. And the next one I read was this one, which I've now bought, and I have a prop. So if you're reading the podcast, I'm going to type it out into a novel form for you now. Now, if you're watching, this book, Virgil Wander, was the next one that I read of his. And it was even less of a John book than what the other one was, because while the other one was a little post-apocalyptic sci-fi, this was about a dude in a small town in the Midwest who had gotten in a car accident, so he had short-term memory loss, felt like a kind of new person and like he had a new lease on life, and he owned a movie theater, and that was kind of the hook. There was like a second hook a little bit later where this gentleman from somewhere in like Scandinavia came and was looking for his son who'd lived in the town for a little while, who the guy knew. But it was very, 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 very light on plot. Not that things didn't happen. They did, but the hook was the characters. And I think even more than the last book, I really fell in love with just this very cozy, simple book about people just living their lives. Which is weird for me just in a book specifically. Like in a play, I love that. Movie, I'm all here for that. It's not usual that I would gravitate towards that in a book, but I really did. A lot of it, I think, the author's name is Leif Anger. I think a lot of it has been his prose. But it just really did hook me. So now I'm reading his first book. So I've been working my way backwards through his discography, but book form, what is that? I don't know. His catalog of books that he's written. And Peace Like a River I'm also enjoying, but is even less of a John book because it's got like kind of like some like Western kind of feel to it, but it's in the 60s, and there's no way in heck that I would have ever pegged that I would be reading a book that kind of revered cowboys and the like. But here I am. And the thing, as I've been thinking about those, that's really struck me was there's like 3 words I've distilled it down to. My wife and I have talked a lot about like being in a cozy story kind of era. She started it, and then I think I really picked that up, where it was like, especially the books we were reading, it was very much like, this is a cozy book. It kind of feels like you're curling up next to a fireplace, and it's crackling, and you've got some hot cocoa, and you're reading and just can kind of relax into it, which connects to my second word for it, this idea of restful art, or art that we're resting in. And then I thought about how that's been used in my life over the years, this year, and that led me to the idea of grounding art. So let me talk about my idea a little bit first, now that I've given my story about how I got here. And then I'm going to talk about what art I think has done this for me this year, because I have found myself very much in a season, kicked off by this book, I think, where most of the art that I've consumed has really primarily been this sort of restful, cozy, grounding art. It's simple. I shouldn't say simple, but it can be simple, but it's not world-ending stakes or someone's life falling apart. It's not tragic or Shakespearean or like a thriller or something I would normally gravitate towards. It is kind of just, I guess, a simplistic setting and just very normal, down-to-earth, day-by-day type stuff. At least that's the feel of it. Obviously, you'll see not all of those fit into that category. But that art has really been ministering to me this year, and has been, I think, one of the things that's helped to keep me somewhat stable amidst Godspell and life changes and, frankly, a lot of hurt and pain from different places. So what is grounding art? Let's get a little philosophical, theoretical here, because I've been talking about my life too much. I have always tended to think that, or be as an artist this challenging artist, like I said. And a lot of times I think I tend to de-emphasize or maybe even sometimes put down the kind of art that is just simple. That's the only word that I can kind of think of that is not profound and challenging, that doesn't maybe necessarily have this greater sort of thematic purpose behind it, right? Like I'm like, oh, you have to have some meat on the bones and you want to challenge people or get people to think or feel really deeply, which these have made me feel really deeply, these works of art this year. But in so doing, I think I have looked at stories that are just about people in their lives where we are right now and the simple things, and sort of put them on a lower tier of art in my brain, right? Like I have a high art, low art kind of differentiation where I'd be like, Hamlet is like peak, right? My gosh, so good. This romantic comedy, mid, as the kids would say, low on the art bar. You know, yes, there's art in it, but like it's like lowest common denominator type stuff. But then I'll also watch and enjoy a good rom-com as well, and have done that for a while. So maybe I'm just a bit of a hypocrite, but we all are. So I think in meeting these, I wasn't expecting them to be as impactful as they were, right? Like I was like, it'll be something to occupy my drive home to listen to the audiobook, or that I can read on my vacation. But they just kind of snuck in and were so incredibly relatable. And then again, just so incredibly restful, which has been strange to me because I don't tend to think that's not true. I was going to say I don't tend to think of stories as restful, but I do. There are stories that I would go to and say, this is a story I feel like I can rest in, but it's very rare, right? Usually if I'm thinking I'm going to rest in a work of art, I'm going to sit and meditate on a painting, or I'm going to listen to a symphony, you know, something like that. But rarely did I think I'm going to get this novel about somebody in a small town, and me being the action hero loving guy that I am, I'm going to be able to just kind of rest in it and take it in slowly. Yet I have been able to do that. So I wanted to pick out a couple things that I think were sort of hallmarks of all these pieces of art, and then talk about a little bit about the ones that did them. So first, I've noticed this kind of art has slowed me down. I think all of the works that I'm going to name that have grounded me have slowed me down, which has been especially important this year because basically every part of my life has been running on all cylinders and going and going and going, right? I'm trying to produce this big show, and I'm trying to cope with life changes, and I'm trying to keep the podcast going and keep, plugging away at school and all these things. And then I crack open this book, or I listen to this song, or I put on this movie, and it, in the way that it's written or the way that it presents itself or the subject matter, just approaches everything in such a gentle way that I am able to put down the phone, put down the textbooks, put down the spreadsheets for Godspell, blocking, all of that, and just meet it where it's at and take off my burdens a little bit and let it take me where it's going to take me. And I think in that, God is actually really the one taking me somewhere, right? Yes, the art is working in me, but it's really God and then the art, and God is using the art in me. That has definitely been true time and time again with these works. And not necessarily in huge, profound ways, just in simple ways of that idea of come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for it's easy and light, right? Like you don't notice the easy and light thing. It's just there and it's easy, right? It isn't this big mountaintop breakthrough thing. The very nature of something being easy and light is that it's you maybe don't notice it. It just feels like there's a little bit of a weight off. And, maybe that's not how you operate 24/7. That's not how I operate 24/7. Definitely. But I think we can find that in little pockets in these pieces of art. So I kind of did my second one there, which is this art lets us, or has let me, rest. So I'm not coming to this art to do work or to go on a crazy emotional journey that's going to leave me life changed, I'm just coming to this beautiful aesthetic grounding piece of art that is gentle, and I'm resting in it. Aesthetic is, I think, an important word as well there, where I think a thing that's tied all of these together as well is there's a very strong aesthetic to them. So it's not just, and that kind of goes without saying, I guess, with art, right? Art is an aesthetic thing. We're making the world more beautiful and making our lives more beautiful and all of that. But for these, it seems like the aesthetic rises up another level, right? So you could have a play where, you just kind of do it in a room and the aesthetic doesn't matter, right? Like if you have this really pared down traveling play, I've been in some, you can just take it anywhere, right? Maybe you have a couple boxes, but you could just be wearing everyday clothes going somewhere. And the aesthetic maybe is not as important of a thing there, even though there could be aesthetic in the writing, directing choices, all of that, right? But for the sake of argument, versus something like our town has a very particular aesthetic of bareness, right? They're like, we're going to pantomime everything and very minimal set, but that creates a specific aesthetic that you're walking into. There's other shows where the set will come out into the lobby, right? And so you're walking in and it's like, wow, I'm in this world. The aesthetic is there. The aesthetic is becoming more important to the art than like the story or what the art is saying, this and that. And I guess I would define aesthetic in this context. I maybe am now realizing that I don't know what the definition of aesthetic is, and I feel like I should look that up. In this context, I would define aesthetic as sort of the general feel and tone of what something is, right? And the word I keep thinking of is vibe. I pulled up the definition. As an adjective, concerned with the beauty or the appreciation of beauty. As a noun, a set of principles underlying and guiding the work of a particular artist or artistic movement, right? So everybody would have like these sort of guiding principles to it. Sometimes, though, that might be more noticeable, the aesthetic that you're going for and the principles that you have, a la our show where the set is coming out into the lobby and is a key part of it, versus the aesthetic is still there for that traveling show that doesn't have any set, but it may not be the first thing you notice. You might not be noticing that beauty and those principles that they've underlined to create the thing, right? So it doesn't necessarily feel as strongly like you're entering into an aesthetic, artistic work. But sometimes, in that version, even though you are, whereas when you enter into that lobby, you're immediately greeted with the aesthetic of the work. That was a long tangent, right? But I think it is in that, for me at least, that I've been able to find I'm able to slow down, because there is this beautiful tapestry, foundational thing that's been built that is beautiful, whether it be prose or music or a soundscape or a performance or direction or, cinematography, painting, whatever, lyrics, all of that. I have found that when I'm able to enter into that, I'm able to rest and I'm able to slow down and say, okay, I am sort of surrendering myself in some sense to the guiding hand of the artist. And that's cool, because that means I don't have to work at this. I can just kind of be. Thirdly, it gives me space to connect with God through the thing that I'm doing, which I talked about again a little bit earlier. I'm just lumping all my points into one, but I do really feel like in these things, in very simple, minute ways, God guided me through things. I think if I'm to turn it into a profound thing, I think God was just connecting me with my own humanity maybe a little bit more, which I definitely needed this year, because I can have a tendency to get like tunnel vision and really just be work, right? And kind of become a machine of just work. So on that aspect, I really needed that. But then on another aspect, when I get really overloaded with emotions, I can stuff them down. I can, just kind of shut everything out, get into that tunnel vision mode for another reason. So I think having things that continually kept me connected to my humanity, I suppose, was just a really important thing this year. And sometimes that's a huge revelatory thing. I don't really think it was for me. Like for this, it was just these simple moments and these pieces of art that made me feel small, simple things, or bigger moving things. But, it was this sort of gentleness towards the emotion that reminded me I'm still alive, I guess, which I feel like is painting this year in very dramatic terms. So now probably everybody's wondering what's going on. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Just, life drama and stuff. So it did help me connect with God and what he wanted to do and work in my life, I think, in some good ways. And then lastly, gave me space to feel and to feel slowly. Like I said, I was able to just feel human and feel these simple, small emotions through these works of art. And it wasn't like the art was saying, you have to feel this now. I'm trying to get this across to you, right? It was just, here's the work that we made. We're giving it to you. Let us take you along. And you feel what you want to feel. Kind of like doing good acting, where you just go along with the story and what happens with your character happens. So those are, I would say, those 4 principles are the things I would pinpoint as being the grounding art for me this year, at least, which for me has been something that's been very gentle and very simple for the most part. It's slowed me down. It's let me rest. It's connected me with the divine, with God, and sort of like that spiritual world, I suppose, and what God is doing in me. And it's given me a space to feel, and it's not pressured me to feel. It's just given me space. Let me do it slowly and gently. So what are the works that have really moved me? I'm going to talk to you guys about them now. I mentioned I Cheerfully Refuse and Virgil Wander already. These were 2 books were kind of like the big ones, I think, for me. So I gave the premise already. I just think the main it was first person, which is usually not something I go for in a book, but then I found I was really enjoying it in this one. The 2 main characters were both men who were just really struggling with a lot of different stuff. In I Cheerfully Refuse, the main character really feels sort of like it's a real gauntlet he's going through. And he's doing this unorthodox thing of sailing across Lake Superior to try and find his wife, which is something he's not even sure is going to work. But in that all, I just really resonated with his struggle and with just, again, those simple, gentle moments of beauty that he had throughout. It gave us time in the details in a way that was not superfluous or gratuitous or frustrating, but was just simple. This is how the world is. We these small moments of beauty, like things with seagulls on his ship that were not huge, but just he came up onto the deck of his ship and there's a group of seagulls just hanging out there, and it's like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen life in 4 days, and here's some seagulls just sitting on my ship, and that's a whole scene, and it was just very simple and beautiful. And then Virgil Wander, I don't even know what it was. I guess just the relationships were really beautiful. They were all really, again, human people. This is the one I would really say helped me stay sort of connected to feeling alive and human. There is a little bit of a love story in there, which just brought me back to my own love story with my wife, and so that was really nice. And I just think everybody's reflecting on life in it, because they're all in a stage of life where it's kind of transitioning. They're like middle-aged. They've lived one life already, it feels like, especially the main character, Virgil, who's now got, short-term memory loss. And he's like, I remember broad strokes of my life, and I remember who people are, and I remember what I do, but I don't remember who I am, and I'm kind of a new person. I think just that theme of new things happening, life going on, even in the midst of really like crazy, difficult things, and being able to like just still be a good person even when you maybe don't know 100% who you are and are still navigating all of that. That just all really resonated with me and was really nice. So, short book recommendation, highly recommend Virgil Wanderer if you want a simple, character-driven, just lovely, gentle piece. Or if you want something a little more plot-driven and a little more intense, I Cheerfully Refuse is really great. I'm trying to keep a minimal about what I say about both of them so that you guys can just take them and enjoy them. Because that was kind of how I did. I went in blind, and they were both really engaging for kind of different reasons, but I loved the prose as well, and just the voice of the narrator, of the author, really, which is also the voice of the character. Both times were just really soothing, lovely voices to sit in with a lot of interesting insights into things in the world going on around them. So that was really great. The next one I'll point out is John Van Dusen, who I've had on the podcast before. You've probably heard me talk about him. He's, I think, my favorite musician. He's kind of this indie punk rock Christian artist. He's a little hard to pin down, but I last year really fell in love with his stuff, and this year his album Marathon Days just really connected emotionally with a lot of what was going on, even though like specific details didn't really match up for me. It felt like just the emotional drive of that, which he wrote in 2020, dealing with a lot of like the political strife going on and questions around the church and what the church was doing and things like that. I think just a lot of those tensions. I'm not struggling with the church personally, but other struggles I've had this year, I feel like it's mapped to pretty well emotionally, especially the song Help Me Let Go has probably been the biggest one. I feel like there was one more, so I'm just looking at the track list really quick so that I can remember what the other one was. Help Me Let Go and Give Back My Heart and Marathon Days and Be Not Far From Here. Those are like the four, but if you need a music suggestion, would highly recommend listen to John Van Dusen's Marathon Days. It's beautiful. It's a little bit angsty, but a lot of it really does feel like a genuine, earnest prayer to God. And again, it feels simple and slow. It kind of oscillates between, I guess I shouldn't say slow because some of them are faster paced, but it kind of oscillates between the gentle, slow vibe and the sort of chaos and angst and rush of our world today, but that's kind of where I've been operating. So for me, that back and forth and like sort of this outcry of what's going on versus this gentle rest in God and kind of hope for the future and what is to come, that balance was really lovely for me and just hit me right where I was. Lord of the Rings, this probably comes as no surprise to anybody, but I love that story. If you've heard me talk about it at all, you probably know why. But I got to see them in theaters this year, and I got to see Lord of the Rings, the musical, in Chicago, which I'm dying to talk about. And I maybe have something cool on an episode with that, but you'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I'm just going to be so cryptic. That story, just those characters really hits me right in the feels, but getting to watch it in theaters, which I've never done before, after having just reread them last year, and then see a new adaptation of it with some beautiful music, has just let me connect to the simplicity of the characters again, which was really great. Like what I was going in for was, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see these epic battles on the big screen, or this beautiful music on stage, which, yes, was cool, admittedly. It's not like I didn't get that as well. But, and it could have just been as simple as I'm watching them all the way through without a phone, without any distractions, so I'm tuned in 100%. But just the beautiful heart of all of those characters, especially Frodo and Sam, and the struggle that Frodo is going through in that story, has really resonated with me a lot over the last years as he's pushing through a lot of difficult circumstances and is not strong enough to do that, and really only gets to the end of his journey through the grace of God in Tolkien's world. It's very subtextual, but it's definitely what Tolkien was doing. That just resonated with me, made me cry. So if you haven't read or watched Lord of the Rings recently, I suggest doing so. Or you could listen to the music for Lord of the Rings the musical, because it's really fun. Couple other artists. Josh Garrels has really, he's one that he's an indie Christian musician, kind of does like a blend between folk and like light hip hop or kind of stuff. Hip hop is maybe the wrong word, but he's one I'd tried to listen to before and I didn't love his voice. But then this year, a couple of his songs really just hit me and I started just listening to a lot of his stuff. But At the Table, has really stuck out to me. Watchmen, which is a newer one of his, stuck out to me. Oh gosh, there's one more and I'm forgetting what it is. Oh man, I can't remember. But look up Josh Garrels as well if you're not into punk rock. He's a little bit of a softer, gentler tone. John Guerrera, oh gosh, I'm going to mess up his name. John Guerrera. It's Guerra. He's another one, indie kind of folk, not folk, pop maybe. I'm really bad at music genres in case you can't tell. But his again is really gentle, soft, sweet stuff. Some of which really resonated with me and where I'm at, I think, just with God and in my life. And then a hymn, because I've been trying to get a little bit more into hymns and choral music, which just choral music in general has been one of the things that I've been able to kind of rest in aesthetically and has been really beautiful. Specific choral piece that I've really liked. It's called Requiem for the Living by Dan Forrest. It's it has 4 movements, and they're lovely. There's a sanctus type thing. One is based around the "Come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest" passage. Can't remember what the other 2 are right now, but if you like choral music in any way, shape, or form, highly recommend just put that on an afternoon and just lay on the couch or sit and just listen and drink it in with the sunshine. Really lovely piece. I have listened to that a lot this year. And then the hymn I was going to talk about, Be Still My Soul, has been one of the anthems of my year. That and Help Me Let Go and Be Not Far From Here, those 2 John Van Dusen pieces, that trio has really been like, this is my... It's not a battle cry. It's not that strong. This has been my anchor, I suppose, musically at least. I've listened to those quite a lot. But just the idea that, the lyrics are, "Be still my soul, the Lord is on thy side, bear patiently the cross of grief or pain. Leave to thy God to order and provide. In every change, he faithful will remain." It's such a simple refrain that if we've grown up in the church, we know, right? Oh yes, God's with us. God's taking care of it. We don't have to worry. Blah, 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 blah. Right? We know that. But that paired with music and I guess just rehearsing that over and over and over in my mind and in my heart and soul has been one of the major things keeping me grounded this year, to know God is on my side, bear the cross and grief and pain, and I'm just going to leave to him to order and provide. He's going to remain faithful. And there's more verses, but every verse rings just as true for me. So if you are looking for a good hymn or a new version of the hymn, Sarah Sparks is the one that I've listened to the most. So Sarah Sparks' version of Be Still My Soul is what I will kind of cap that off with. So there's a bunch of resources from me because I feel like normally I don't give you resources. So I want to hear from you guys. What do you consider to be grounding or restful in your art, right? I've identified some things this year that have been restful and good. There's other things for me that can be, right? Like sometimes I need a good cry. Sometimes I need Inside Out and need to watch a catastrophe in a person's brain, right? Or a Hamlet, and I need to watch someone's life fall apart. Sometimes that's what I need. But this year I've really needed this gentle, simple, easy, light, grounding art that is deep and profound. It's not without depth, but it is just approaching me very simply and saying, here it is. You can just rest in the aesthetic and in what we've created and go on the journey and feel what you feel. So that's been it for me. What for you guys is the grounding art that you've taken in this year? What's kept you anchored? What's God used for you to stay sane? Are there simple, gentle, beautiful things that you've engaged with? Or is there just art that surprised you? Like for me this year, maybe you are someone who's like, yeah, I tend to read, historical romance or Amish fiction, but this year I watched a Marvel movie and was deeply moved. I don't know. Or an R-rated tragedy and was like, wow, my life has changed. I don't know. I want to hear from you guys. So go to our website, artistoftheway.com. We've got a contact form on the main page. Scroll down. You can put it in there. You can comment on Facebook, Instagram, or message me either of those ways. I would love to hear from you. And if you have specific things and you want to share them with the rest of our audience, send me a link to that. I'll post it on Facebook, on Instagram, and in our story and say, hey, this is the art that's grounded people this year. I don't have to go into details of how it's grounded you, but can just be like, here's recommendations. I'm going to throw these at you. I feel like my hand is very violent on the video now, so I'm going to stop that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, continuing to listen. I really do appreciate it. I feel very chaotic when I'm making these, but usually they're out, and you guys continue to return and listen and share your thoughts, and that means so much to me. This podcast has been such an incredible blessing. Godspell was such a blessing, but just this, again, it's a simple, gentle, rhythmic thing, but it is such a blessing. Can't wait to share our upcoming guests with you guys, especially next week's. Make sure you check back next week because it is maybe one of the interviews I'm most excited that I ever get to give. And it has something to do with Lord of the Rings, the musical. So check back next week. Thanks, guys. God bless. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening.